Lance, you're the guy we come to for when it comes to numbers about agriculture and farming, and that cannot be always an exciting, but it's a really important
For sure.
area, especially when it comes to equipment. Do you have a guess? Like when it comes to equipment, do most people buy or do most people lease, do you think?
Well, I think the majority of them is still buying. I don't know what the exact number would be, but the majority of people have a buying mentality and will focus on that. Leasing is sort of a new game in the financing market, relatively, and so people are dabbling in it, but some are bigger.
So why do you think they buy? Is it because they don't understand leasing?
Tried and true. They understand it. They own the piece of equipment. They understand there's no surprises. If they don't want to give it back in a certain time period, they want to keep it for a long period of time. They know what's all involved with when they own the piece of equipment. Whereas leasing, there's a lot of unknowns, probably disclosed in their lease contract, but a lot of people aren't sure of what's exactly involved.
So you're an accountant. You're a farmer. You've done both for a long time. Why do people lease? It's a vehicle I think we mostly don't understand. Do we do it for the right reasons?
Well, I don't think so. I think the majority, from what I saw as a chartered accountant in practice, was people were leasing for tax purposes. I'd ask, a client would come in and want to, maybe acquire a piece of equipment, or they maybe have already acquired it, and I'd ask, what did they do? And they'd say, well, I leased it. And I'd ask why, and they said for tax purposes, and not understanding the tax implications at all. It's a very simple tax rules around leasing, but in a lot of cases, if people want a tax write-off, most times it's better to buy. There's other reasons why we want to lease, but tax usually isn't one of them. And there's a big miscommunication or misconception with people that think that leasing is going to be much better for tax, and it's in most cases not.
So what would my situation have to be that I should consider a lease?
Leasing is really good for cash flow. If you're tight on cash flow, it's an easy way to get into a new piece of equipment, or cheaper way to get into a new piece of equipment. If it's something that you're going to be turning over quite regularly, maybe you want to keep it on warranty or you want dealer support, and you know that you're going to be replacing it in a couple of years. Leasing is just condensing your payments and using it just for that time period, and then getting another new one in 2 years. If you're a long-term holder of equipment and you don't believe in flipping it over every time something new comes along or new technology, then buying is probably a better option for you in that kind of scenario.
So you were talking about leasing. When you go to a dealership, what should I be aware of if I'm leasing? Just in terms of making sure that it is an actual lease.
Okay. Well, I think it's important to ask a few questions and make sure that you understand what you're signing when you're getting into the lease. Like, for instance, what are the hour requirements? What are the maintenance requirements on the piece of equipment? What are the refurbishing costs of bringing back that lease? All those are very important things to be talking to the leasing company before you sign the lease. And understand that it's just a financing contract. It's much like a buying contract. There's going to be an interest rate that's charged, so you're going to want to find out what the interest rate is being charged on it. Quite often people will sell a lease based on the payment. They don't want to necessarily tell you what the interest rate is because it's maybe too high, but they're selling you on a payment. And if cash flow is the most important thing for you and you need to acquire that piece of equipment, that might be important to you. But I think there's a lot of other questions that you could be asking, or more details around that lease that you could be finding out that you'd feel more comfortable about signing it.
You talked about your circumstances in terms of whether I buy or lease the equipment. But does it vary? So I tell you I generally buy equipment, but should it or can it vary actually from equipment to equipment?
For sure. I think you need to pick a piece, and leasing, I don't think you're going to want to lease every piece of equipment on your farm. There's going to be certain pieces that might make more sense. For instance, on our farm, I would consider a sprayer maybe as one of the most used pieces of equipment and the highest maintenance type of piece of equipment. So I'm going to be using that and probably turning it over fairly quickly. So if it's something that I'm going to turn over in every couple of years, leasing is going to have a better fit than buying it. Something that I'm going to buy on my farm and leave on my farm for a long period of time, that's something that I'm going to want to look at buying, because there's not a lot of benefit. Leasing is probably going to end up costing me more to have that piece of equipment if I'm going to maintain ownership of it for a long time.
Okay, so seasonal type equipment potentially is something you want to own.
Yeah, like the sprayer, for instance, it's something that we use right away the first thing in the spring, and it's the last piece of equipment we put away in the fall, and we use it basically throughout the whole growing season. So it's something that I need to have available to me and be, ready to go, not breaking down. Maybe possibly want to have warranty, so I have dealer support, so that when there's a insect outbreak or a disease that I need to deal with, I can deal with it right away.
Lance, let's have a look at equipment from the actual dealership and the dealership staff perspective. What sort of questions, what sort of approach should they be taking when they're actually talking to a customer?
I think they have a role to play with their customers, and that's important for them to understand what their needs of their customer are. And I think cash flow is probably going to be one of the big things for the understanding the cash flow needs of their customer and making get them to that piece of equipment that they need or want for the right payments. But in the end, make sure that you're protecting your customer too, because if you sign them into something that they're going to have a bad feeling about when it's the end, their relationship's not going to be very good. So understand that you might be able to make the sale today, but how's that going to impact them later on? And make sure that the customer is still going to be happy at the end of the lease as well, so that you're disclosing everything to them and they understand what the leasing is going to be for them.
Lance, appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Take care.